Welcome back, everyone, to the Space City X-Files, episode 15. Thank you for tuning in this week. I'm glad you did. And hopefully by the end of the show, you'll share that sentiment. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone, to the Space City X-Files, episode 15. Thank you for tuning in this week. I'm glad you did. And hopefully by the end of the show, you'll share that sentiment. So, what do we have in store for you this week? Well, that's a good question. And it's a strange one. I'll just say that much. I'll start out with saying that. Definitely a strange one. And I know all our cases are strange, but this one here stands out amongst the rest, in my opinion. It's about a hiking expedition that 9 Russian citizens decided to embark on back in the 50s, 1959, to be specific. And what was supposed to be a routine, leisure-like hike would instead end in the death of all 9, all under circumstances that remain a mystery to this very day. Now, when investigators examined the scene after the bodies were found, it appeared that at some point in the middle of the night there was a panic, and this caused the members to cut their way out of their tents and flee. Most wearing only their undergarments with no shoes. This brings up the question, what was so terrifying that these experienced hikers decided to risk their life in the snow in sub-freezing temperatures? Why do this? Why rush out of there and just risk your life, then remain another minute in their campsite? And that's what we hope to find out. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. And before we get started, allow me a few minutes to get the disclaimers out of the way. Space City X-Files appreciates all the support you give week in and out. And what we've been able to accomplish so far would not be possible without you. If you would like to know how you can become a supporter of the show, there are 3 main ways to do that, and I'll give you the details now. The first way, if you would like to support by becoming a member, you can go to our website and click on the Patreon tab. And once there, it gives you the option to sign up for a $5 or $10 a month membership. And that's going to get you unreleased full episodes, access to our private Discord group, free merchandise that we're going to drop on you at random times. Secondly, if you're not ready for a monthly subscription but would like to make a one-time donation, on our website is a support us with the tip tab, and there you could type in whatever amount you want. 50 cents, $1, $5, whatever. It's all appreciated the same. And because we're dedicated to elevating the quality of our program, all the proceeds will always go back into the show to benefit the final product. The last and most effective way to support the show is to leave us a review after you listen, wherever you listen. I can't say how important this is. With your feedback, we can improve our show and bring in new listeners, which is priceless. And one last plug, our show store is also available on the website, and it's stocked with hoodies, tees, stickers, and that also helps support the show. And that concludes the announcements. Alright, I think we're ready to get started, so let me give you a rundown of what you can expect from today's show. All right, this incident is pretty much isolated to the Dyatlov Pass. So what we'll do first is we'll talk about the area so we can get a mental picture of what the hikers were experiencing. This will also tell us if there were any strange anomalies associated with that area that may have contributed to this incident or any in the past. Now, once we have that out of the way, we can look at the events that took place from the start of the hike to the time communication stopped, and finally when the authorities and searchers discovered the remains around the area of the campsite. After going over the details, we can finally start to take a look at all the main theories that are thought to have been the cause of this incident. And I can tell you that there's quite a few, to say the least. So we're going to be spending more time in this area to make sure that we cover them thoroughly. Okay. And of course, after we go over the main theories, then we can let you know what we think happened and why. So now that we got the overview out of the way, let's proceed with the case. What is the Dyatlov Pass? The Dyatlov Pass is a name given posthumous after this very incident. It's a region located in the Ural Mountains in the Sverdlovsk Oblast, Russia. And, I'm sorry, before we go any quicker, there's going to be a lot of Russian names and a lot of words. And I'm not Russian, so, if I say it wrong or mispronounce something, I don't mean any disrespect. I tried to research this as much as possible, but I'm going to make some mistakes, so I just want to say that first. Don't be mad at me. All right, so now the area has several large peaks and valleys, but the one specific to the case happens to sit about 800 meters above sea level and is positioned near two river streams, which is the Reka Losva and the Reka Auspia. Now, as we mentioned in the intro, it's been reported that more than a few of the hikers died of hypothermia, and they are in the mountains of Russia. So we need to know, how cold was it that February? So according to our research, Februarys can be brutal there, with the temperatures dropping as low as negative 20 degrees. That's freaking cold with the wind shear. All right, you throw snow on top of that, that's damn cold. All the more odd that they would evacuate the campsite with nothing but their garments, regular garments on, right? Besides the occasional snowstorm, though, there's nothing else out of the ordinary for this particular location. Just trees, rocks, snow, a few streams, and the great lonely wilderness that encumbers an undisturbed mountain range like this one. And before we go any further, just to clear up a misconception before we get into the details, if you search the case up, you'll probably see a report that came out around 2021 or 2022 by some Swiss scientists that claimed they found evidence of an avalanche, and they claimed this basically solved the case. All right. Now, they used these findings, of course, to try to support their original theory that the hikers were killed by something called a freak slab avalanche. So let me get this out of the way. They did indeed find evidence of an avalanche in the close proximity, but it was not the location where the hikers had made their camp. In fact, it was so far away that the findings that they had do little for clearing up what happened that day. Basically, they just wanted to try to set a precedence that avalanches did happen in the area. But, of course, in this case, they checked for that, and they couldn't find one that happened that night. All right? And so we'll go over this more later, but just wanted to give you that information now. Okay, so now you got some kind of idea of what the Dyatlov Pass area is. Keep it in your mind's eye as we go over the case details. All right, so it's January 25th, 1959, and a group mostly consisting of alumni from a college named Ural Polytechnical School are geared up to embark on an excursion put together by their local Komsomol organization, which is also known as the Russian Communist League. To summarize what the Komsomol is, it's basically like an organization that helps mold the youth for a stronger future country. And that's why these 9 Russian citizens were doing this. It was kind of like a rites to passage so they can get their certification as level 3 hikers or trekkers or whatever the correct name is. I'm not sure. It's important to note that all these members were at least level 2 certified, which means they all knew how to survive in the wilderness. Okay. So they have their orders and their route book, which contains the path they're going to take. And now Igor Dyatlov, the leader, Yuri Doroshenko, Yudmina Dubinina, Alexander Kolvatov, Zenaida Komorgorova, Yuri Kurmanashenko, Rustem Slobodin, and Nikolai Brignol, Simeon Zoltaryov, and Yuri Yudin are all set to hit the road. They leave Ivdel, which is at the center of Sverdlovsk Oblast, by truck to Vishay, the last inhabited town close to the Reka Auspia. Now from here, they perform their last checks on their gear and rations, and after determining that everything is good, on the 26th, they start their traverse with their first stop set to be Ortorton, the Ortorton Mountain. Now, shortly before they left, surprisingly, Yuri Yudi has to tap out due to some complications with his sciatic nerve. Now, this could be just a series of unfortunate events for Yuri, or could it have been part of the plan? I don't know. We'll dive into this more when we go over case theories. So, marching along on the 26th of January, their next recorded stop would be a logger's cabin called District 41. It's documented in their travel journal that they arrived here all in good health at 4:30 in the afternoon, and then the following day at 4 p.m. on the 27th, they headed for their next marker. By 11 p.m., traveling on skis, they would arrive at another shelter named the Second Northern. Now, this place was documented in their travel journal as being an ex-labor camp. And so now the time is not documented on when they leave this site, but we do know they rested for a while. They would, though, log their next camping site, which is about 22 kilometers or 14 miles to the north, remaining along the Reka Auspia. Now, to try and give context of a time frame here, they left District 41 at 4 p.m. for their next location and didn't arrive there until 11 p.m. So, the distance is known between those 2 points, and it's said to be 24 kilometers. So that means they were averaging about 3 kilometers an hour. Now, with that knowledge, it's pretty safe to say that they arrived at their camp spot on the 28th at approximately 2 p.m.-ish, assuming that they rested about 8 hours. And so the reason why I'm trying to track time now is because from here, they no longer list the times on their journals when they arrive or leave. So I'm just trying to keep track. And so now this night on the 28th, they do have a log entered into a type of group journal, and it states the following quote. It reads, "Today we spent our first night in the tent. The guys are busy with the stove, with some things completed and others not. We sit for dinner. Once we're done, we make our way inside the tent. Nobody wants to sleep by the furnace. We agree that Yurka Cree will sleep there." And Yurka Cree would be Yuri Krivanashenko. Okay. After 2 minutes, Yuri moves to another place, cursing. We can't fall asleep for a while, and we argue about something. And so, just to say, the translation probably isn't the best, but you get the gist, right? I mean, they seem okay, no real issues besides some small bickering, which can be expected when you're out in the elements like they were. Alright, something else to note of this night is next to their campsite, there happened to be some kind of landmark from a tribe of indigenous peoples that lived in an area called the Mansi. Now, one of the theories as to what happened to the hikers was the Mansi people were involved with their deaths because they were technically encroaching on their sacred land, okay? And not to go too far into this theory yet, but I would just like to point out now that whoever was making the log for the group made note of the landmark's location and wrote next to it, "No women allowed." All right, and that struck me as super odd. So, because there was 2 women with them. All right, and so the next campsite would be documented on the 29th, and it appears that they made their usual distance of 14 kilometers or so from their previous site. So they're keeping, they're putting out the same amount of effort each day. And so in their group log, they say things are pretty calm. The day is sunny, but it grows colder from the morning to the afternoon. They speak of signs and glyphs from the Mansi people left everywhere and how beautiful the surrounding area is. Zenaida ends the day logging in her journal, and this is quoted, and it reads, "Today is Yurka's birthday." And she's talking about Yuri Doroshenko. Okay. We go first to Lospa, then we turn to Auspia. Surroundings are beautiful. Along the Auspia, Mansi have passed. A trail is visible, grooves, and a path is visible. We often see Mansi signs on the trail. I wonder what they write about. Now the Mansi's trail goes south. And then it says, now we sit, the three of us, Rustem, Yurka, and I, waiting for the rest. For the night stopped near ski tracks. We are burning firewood with Yurka. We talked about the past. He's such a playboy. End quote. So, pretty good day it appears, with good progress made, and even the hint of some flirting going on. And so, hey, whatever happens on the Reka Auspia stays on the Reka Auspia, right? That's the motto over there, from what I hear. And so, on the 30th, the morning starts off with a harsh chill at about -13, and for sure, they noticed this right away, all right? They're feeling it. In an unknown diary suspected to be penned by Zenaida, but, her name is not attributed to it, but it's, I guess, her writing matches or something. That's how they came up with that. But she states, quoted, "In the morning it's 17 degrees, and now it's getting colder. Those on duty are repeating their duties today as punishment for slowing the group." And she mentions that that's Kolvatov and Nikolai. Those two are on punishment. And they're on punishment because they took a long time to start a fire yesterday. And so in the evening, it was decided that we will leave the tent exactly 8 minutes after waking the next morning. Therefore, all have been awake and waiting for the command, but it's useless. Around 9:30 in the morning, we begin to slowly rise. Nikolai is joking about something in the morning. Everyone is reluctant to get up, and the weather. In contrast to the rest of the warm days, today is sunny and cold. The sun appears playful. Today, as yesterday, we are following the path of the Mansi. Sometimes Mansi writings appear on the trees. In general, all sorts of obscure, mysterious characters appear. There is a slogan for our trek, and the slogan is, "In a country of mysterious signs." If we knew these letters, it would be possible, without any doubt, to go down the path, confident that it would lead us to the right place. Here the trail takes us to the shores of the river. We lose track. In the future, the trail follows the bank of the Osprey River. But the team of deer crossed the river, and now we're going into the woods. At the first opportunity, we will turn back to the river, as it is easier to follow it. At approximately 2 p.m., we stop for lunch. Dried meat, guest crackers, sugar, garlic, coffee, stocked in the morning. That's our lunch. Good morning. A couple more hours, and we will stop at 5 p.m. for the night. We have been looking for a place. Then we returned about 200 meters back. A charming place. Dead wood, high pines. In short, everything you need for a good night. End quote. Now, this was one of the more eventful days since the trek started, okay? And it appears that there has already been some kind of shortcomings and miscommunications going around at this point. We also see that they plan to stop at the next camp at 5 p.m., though when they got there, the drama seemed to continue. All right, so let's hear this quote again from the unknown diary. And this is that same night. It says, Ludya and they're talking about Dubinina. It says that she quickly got tired and sat down by the fire. Nikolai changed his clothes. He began to write in his diary. The law is that until all work is done, do not approach the fire. And so they had a long argument of who will sew the tent. Finally, Nikolai gave up and took a needle. Lydia remained seated, and we sewed the hole. And there were so many that there was enough work for all except 2 attendants and Lydia. The guys are terribly outraged. Today is the birthday of Sasha Kolvatov. Congratulations. We give him a tangerine, which he immediately divided into 8 pieces. Lydia went into the tent and did not come out until the end of dinner. So, another day of our trek went well. End quote. So in this last account, there turned out a few discrepancies, okay? So on one account, it appears that the unknown writer calls Kolvatov by the wrong name and has his wrong birth date. Now, only after some investigation, it turns out that instead of Kolvatov, she was talking about Zolotaryov, which was the older man. And we know this because Yuri Yudin stated that Zolotaryov was actually requesting that people call him Sasha, which is odd, okay? And it got even more suspicious when he himself told everyone that it was his birthday, which his birthday wasn't until the 2nd. Well, we found that out later. And so, sure, I mean, you can, if you were there or if you were around him, or if this whole incident didn't go down, I mean, you could probably brush it off to as, the guy was, possibly just looking for some attention, or maybe he wanted to pretend that he was another person. Only that later there would turn up many weird facts about Zolotaryov, even after his death, that makes people consider him a viable theory on how the hikers lost their lives. And so we'll pick back up on this in theories, but let's finish the timeline, all right? And we're almost there. Okay, so hang in there with me because the shit's about to hit the fan, all right? So, on the 31st, now they have reached the base of the area that would soon come to be known as Dyatlov Pass. So let me read to you the last excerpt recorded in the group diary. And it reads, quote, "The weather today is a bit worse. The wind is westward. It's snowing, probably from the pines, since the sky is perfectly clear. We started relatively early, around 10 a.m. We got back on the Mansi Trail. Up to now, we are following a Mansi Trail on which not so long passed a hunter with deer. Yesterday, it seemed we stumbled upon his resting spot. The deer didn't go any further. The hunter took the beaten trail by himself. We are following in his steps. Had a surprisingly good overnight. Air is warm and dry, though it's negative 18 degrees Celsius to negative 24 degrees Celsius. Walking is especially hard. We can't see the trail. We have to grope our way through at times. We can't do more than 1.52 kilometers per hour. Trying out new ways to clear paths right now. The first in line drops his backpack and skis forward for about 5 minutes, and then comes back for a 10 to 15 minute break, and then he catches up to the group. That's one way to keep laying ski tracks nonstop. It's hard on the second hiker, though, who has to follow the new trail with full gear on his back. We gradually leave the Ospia Valley. It's upwards all the way, but goes rather smoothly. Thin birch grove replaces firs. The end of the forest is getting closer. The wind is western, warm, piercing, with the speed like the draft from airplanes at takeoff. Fern in the open places. I can't even think of setting up storage here. It's nearly 4 p.m. Have to start looking for a place to pitch the tent. We go south in the Aspia Valley. Seems this place has the deepest snow. Wind not too strong, snow about 1.22 meters deep. We're exhausted, but setting up for the night. The firewood is scarce, mostly damp firs. We build the campfire on the logs. Too tired to dig a fire pit. Dinner's in the tent, nice and warm. I can't imagine such comfort on the ridge with howling wind outside. Hundreds of kilometers away from human settlements. Dyatlov's last record in the diary. End quote. And that would be the last data entry anyone would ever make in their diaries, okay? So, what we know happened after that was pieced together with pictures taken and evidence from the investigation and the medical examiners. And so what we do know is that the little shack or the cache they were hoping to get built, it did get built. So they have pictures of that. And shortly after that, or possibly the next day, on the 2nd of February, they were able to set up their campsite on the ridge. Now, what happened next is sometime on the night of the 2nd, or possibly the 3rd of February, something prompts Semyon Zolotaryov to go outside with his camera. There were reports that something may have been in the sky that night, but anyway, it's theorized that he may have called the rest out to come see what he was seeing. Based off some of the pictures on Zolotaryov's camera, he was possibly taking pictures of the lights from inside the tent through various holes as well. Now, it's important to know that where they pitched the tent that night happened to be on a slope. So it's also a possibility that he was taking pictures of the sky, or if he was taking pictures in the opposite direction, he would have been taking pictures of the tree line. Whatever the case, at some point, something causes the group to flee from their campsite and head further down the slope of the Dyatlov Pass toward the tree line in the direction of the Reka Lospa. And that would be their last night alive, to our knowledge. Multiple search crews are sent out after failed communication from the group, and finally some of the remains were located as early as the 27th of February, and then the rest latest as of May. So there was quite some time between the first discovery and the final accountability of all the bodies. And so I'll include in the show notes a good map that gives you a visual description of everything we've gone over so far, okay? But to give you the best mental picture of it now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe the persons found closest to the tent, and then the people that were, and then kind of go work backwards, okay? So I'll describe the people that were found closer to the tent and work backwards. And then also I'm going to be describing to you their injuries, okay? So it's important to note that all the bodies were found in a straight line almost, okay? From the tent to a den that they dug into the snow for protection, to a cedar tree where a fire was made, and it's thought that at one time they were all gathered under together. So, to start off with, Zenaida Kolmogorov was found closest to the tent, in a position on the ground that gave the impression she was either climbing towards the tent, trying to stay low to the ground, or she was trying to maintain her grip so she did not slip backwards. Her head was facing the direction of the tent. Okay, so that's what lets us know that she was working towards that direction. All right. Zenaida was found wearing the most clothes out of anyone else in the group. She had 2 hats, long sleeve underneath her shirt, another overshirt. She had a sweater, and then she had a long sleeve checkered sleeve shirt buttoned up. On her lower body, she had long cotton sport pants, trousers, ski pants that had 3 small holes at the bottom, and 3 pairs of socks worn on each foot. So 3 pairs on one, 3 pairs on the other. All right. In her pocket was but she didn't have shoes on. Okay, that's one thing that's important to note. In her pocket, she had 5 rubles, and in her chest pocket, she had a military style protective mask, which I found really odd. In none of the pictures, and I'll give you the link to where you can see all the pictures they took from their cameras, did I ever see her or anyone in the group wearing a ski mask of that sort. Okay, this completely. I don't know if if she had it with her the whole time, she never took it out. I mean, that we know of from the pictures. Okay, and there were some pictures where it was snowing too. So I mean, if you were gonna wear something like that, that would be the time to take it out, right? But never seen it on her. Nobody else had one of those either. So it's not like they. I was thinking that maybe they handed them out to them before they started their march. Kind of giving them some equipment, but that's not the case. And so yeah. So there's that. All right. So Zenaida had bruises on her face and lacerations on her hands. And according to the autopsy, the thing that stood out the most was an oblong impact impression on the lower right small of her back. All right. So where the arch is on her back, it'd be above her right buttock. There was like she got hit with a bat or something. Okay, so either it was a bat or a club, something. The damages were ruled to have happened while she was still alive and were caused by blunt instruments and repeated falls on the rock or ice or trees. No alcohol was found in her body or in anybody's body, so they weren't drinking. And it's reported that her virginity was intact. All right, so that cancels out any theory that the attacks came from escaped inmates, as it would have been highly unlikely that they left the women unmolested. All right. And so the next person closest to the tent would be Rustin Slobodin. Now, Rustin was dressed about as well as Zenaida was. He had 4 layers on top and 4 on bottom. And he had 4 layers on socks. 4 layers of socks on both foot. He only had 1 felt boot on, and that was on his right foot. The left one was missing. In his pockets, he had money. He had a penknife attached to a string, which is kind of funny. He had his passport on him in his shirt pocket, and he had some matches and a pen in another. Rustam's injuries were more harsh than Zenaida's. Rustam had a rather large skull fracture on the right side of his skull and a smaller one on the left. His wrist had a large abrasion on the back where the hand meets the joint, and all his knuckles were swollen and bruised on each hand, consistent with what occurs in a fight. His lip was swollen along with his eye, and it was all occurring while he was still alive. The blow to Rustam's head would have left him unconscious with no coordination, so this likely sped up the process of him freezing to death. The odd thing is, a layer of ice was formed underneath his body, which meant he was alive when he landed in that very spot, which could also mean the blow to his head that left him unconscious happened while he was on his way back to the campsite, away from the others who were down below. It's worth it to mention, too, that Rustam was the most fit out of all the crew. All right, he was the athletic guy. Next off, a little way behind Rustam, was the leader of the group, Igor Dyatlov. And so, looking at Igor's autopsy, it was very short. It looked very rushed, And so, after examining those documents, it looks like the paperwork, the same person was performing the assessments. Okay, so it's the same medical examiner, and hopefully he didn't just get complacent and start pencil whipping the reports. Just trying to hurry up and get them over with. And hopefully that's not the case, because I mean, who knows what he would have left out. And so it says Igor had 3 layers on the upper part of his torso, and he had 3 layers on the bottom. He had no shoes like the others, but even less when it came to socks. So he only had three. And they were all, no, two on one foot and one sock on the other. In his pockets, he had some pills that were still in his packets that helped combat infections from wounds. Igor had abrasions consistent with the fall concentrated to the center of his face. He had wounds on the back of his hands, just like the other two so far, which is odd. Igor's knuckles, like Rustem's, were all swollen on both hands, so it looked like he was throwing some hands. Somebody was catching the fade. I don't know who it was, but somebody was. And so that's that for those three. Those three were the ones closest to the tent. Now, down by the tree line, away from the tent, there were four members of the party, and they were found together, most just feet apart. And this was in the location of that makeshift inn that we mentioned earlier. Now, the fact that they made this den tells us that they were still using their wit to survive, okay? And that, in my opinion, cancels out the notion that everyone was panicking and just running around crazy, making mistakes. You know, these guys and girls were still using their smarts. And so the den, for one, was dug deep enough to where the walls protected them from the wind, and they cut branches down and kind of stacked them on top of each other, you know, like crossways to make like a square. And they put a few layers of clothes on top of them. And they did this so they can stop exposure from, their skin to direct snow. So they were using their smarts. And it's worth mentioning here also that the cedar tree where they had made a fire was really close by, just a few meters away. So they can go get warm, and then they can go, I think that's what they were doing, taking turns by the fire. The others would sit in the den. And it was pretty smart, And, I just want to say this real quick too, that the people who discovered them after checking out the den, they said that should have been sufficient for them to survive there overnight, because it blocked the wind and it was keeping them basically a little bit out of the elements. And there's a picture that I'll put in the show notes, that way you can take a look at it. It wasn't like a little small thing that they did. I don't know how they did it, but they carved it out. It's a pretty good square sized area. And so, all right, at this location here, at that den, you have, it was Ludmila Dubinina, and then there was Alexander Kolbatov, there was Nikolai Brignol, and Seyman Zolotaryov were all found on the same day of the 5th of May in 1959 by a Mansi native. And so, going over the list of their injuries and the autopsies, let's start with Dubinina first. Okay, so where she was found starts off kind of strange. All right, so instead of her being found in the den that they built to, basically cover themselves, she was found in a stream that was actually just a short ways in front of the den. Okay, so somehow she ended up in that stream. Now, whether the stream was flowing that day, I'm not 100% sure. Okay, but when she was found, the water was streaming over her, along with the others found in the area. Okay, so Dubinina had 3 layers of clothes on her top and 3 on the bottom. And I'm sorry. She had 3 layers of clothes on her top. And one of the very mysterious things to note is that one of the sweaters she was wearing tested positive for high levels of radiation. All right. This is not just... Okay, so after reading of how concentrated the radiation was, it was reported that this level of radiation doesn't happen by accident. Okay, it was a significantly high level of radiation, and it was enough to enough to cause problems if you were exposed to it for long enough. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there and let you know that little bit of information. Now, I'm not 100% sure what caused them to do the test in the first place. I've read a little bit about, somebody said people got sick from the water around that area. So I guess that just prompted them to want to do tests. But after doing the test, they found that she had high levels of radiation on her sweater. And because of her sweater, and because of another from Alexander and Simon, because they both had levels of radiation on their sweaters also, the pilots that were there to transport their bodies when they were discovered and ready to be flown out, it was reported that that they didn't even want to take the pilots didn't want to take the body. They didn't want it on their plane. You know what I mean? Because they had heard that they had radiation on it. And so it was reported that one of the officers became so enraged because they spent so much time and effort, carefully exhuming these bodies, that whenever he found out they didn't want to take the bodies, that he pulled his sidearm and he threatened the pilots and he made them change their mind. Like, you're going to take these bodies and that's it. And so, continuing on, Dubinina had 3 layers on her bottom also, but only had a single sock on each foot. And it appears in her final attempt to combat hypothermia, she cut up a sweater and wrapped it around both feet. And now what stands out the most are Dubinina's injuries, okay? She was missing her eyes. She was missing her tongue. The meat that's under your tongue, that kind of connects the tongue to the bottom of the jawline. She was missing all of that also. And in the autopsy report, there was blood in her stomach. So a lot of blood in her stomach. So this meant that the tongue was removed while she was still alive. And so she was like swallowing blood. Okay. And the cartilages in her nose had been smashed down flat, which is a terrible injury in itself. She also had about 6 ribs broken on each side of her body. One which was so severe that it punctured the heart's right atrium. I mean, it's pretty clear, right, that these injuries are what caused the death. There was no way possible that they were going to claim hypothermia on this one. The crazy part is she was doing her best to keep warm. She was cutting clothes in half, to wrap around her freezing body parts. She fled the tent. She helped make the den, because there's no way one person made that den. There had to have been at least 4 or 5 people on it at one time in order to get it done that fast. So she was active. And the point that I'm trying to make is that there was no way in hell that she did this after she was injured. You know what I mean? There's no way. So that can only mean that it happened to her after she fled the tent. Right? And we'll come back to this one. But keep that in your mind, though. The next is Alexander Kovatov. Now, Alexander was dressed well on his body, but the problem for him was that he was found without a hat and he didn't have shoes on either foot. He was found in the stream along with Dubinina with abrasions to his face and hands. Alexander also had burn marks all over his jacket and socks, as did Dubinina. And it's funny that in the records, nobody really makes an issue of that, And to me, I ask myself, how does one burn their clothes unless they were laying in the fire trying to keep warm? And that doesn't make sense. The other oddity that the examiner fails to address is the wound behind Alexander's right ear. And this wound ended up penetrating into his mastoid process, which is plainly put the bone behind the ear at the base of the skull. It appears that at some point also Alexander's neck was snapped too. Terrible injuries. And I don't see how the examiner, in his professional opinion, ruled that poor Alexander died of low temperature. But he did. So if you look at his autopsy report, that's what it's going to say. And that's crazy. So to me, it really starts to look like the examiner sees an out, being that they were kind of found in extreme temperatures and they were underdressed. And so instead of actually having to do actual work, they kind of used the elements as their excuse. And one last thing to mention about Alexander was that he was found in a position that appeared like he was shielding Semyon from something before he died. Okay. So Nikolai Brignol, the other one that was there inside the or by the den, was said to have possibly been outside using the restroom the same time Zolotaryov was taking his pictures of the strange lights. This would have been before Zolotaryov called anyone else outside. Now, because of this reason, Zolotaryov and Nikolai were the best dressed for the occasion, being outside in the snow. Nikolai had 4 layers on top, 4 layers on bottom. He had 2 caps. He had gloves. He had both shoes, both boots, 3 layers of socks on each feet. And so, as you can tell from this description, he was outside with a purpose. All right? And here's the strange part about his injuries. He only had 3 wounds. 3 wounds, but they were super deadly and purposeful, in my opinion. Nikolai had a bruise above his left lip. He had a bruise to his right bicep. And he had a huge crush to his temporal bone, which is the part of the skull behind the temple. So basically the side of the head. So without a doubt, the examiner acknowledges that this is what killed him. It said the examiner says it usually takes the force of a car accident to cause trauma like this. And in the examiner report, the doctor says that either he fell from a substantially high place or he was hurled at something and hit his head on whatever he ran into. Now, Nikolai's injuries really make you scratch your head. I mean, if he was hurled at something, where are the other broken bones that would show up on the rest of the body? You know? How come he only had 2 other injuries? How is that possible? To die in such a violent way, and the only thing that's, and the only other 2 things that are wrong with you is a bruise on your bicep and a bruised lip? And here's another thing. There's no way this happened while he was at the campsite. There's no way. The kind of injury, with that kind of injury, he would be out. I mean, he would barely be clinging to his life. There's no way that they were able to move him down to the den, and he damn sure couldn't have walked or crawled himself. No, let me tell you what happened. They fled the campsite and they hid down by the tree line, by the stream, hoping that whatever was there would pass, but it didn't. Finally, last of the 4 around the den area, we have Semyon Zolotaryov, and this guy is a mystery, but interesting. And he's really the oddball of the group. I mean, everyone there was a recent graduate or student of Ural Polytechnical School, and they were all in their early 20s, but Zolotaryov was 38 and never attended that school. What about the fact that his birthday was February the 2nd? Likely the same day they would all die. And apparently he was like a war hero on top of that. So according to records from what I read, he served the whole time during World War II on the front lines, from 41 to 46 and gained 4 awards, military awards, by the end of it. And there were even a few reports of his strange behavior before this trip, and I'll add that much, and I'll put it in the show notes too, so you can go and read that yourself. On that night, though, since he was already outside, he was dressed well for the occasion, similar to Nikolai. Semyon had 4 layers on top and bottom with caps, gloves, and both shoes. So it was pretty safe to say that the cold was not going to be the reason Semyon passed away. No, his injuries, though, were as vicious as poor Dubinina's. In fact, as of now, theirs would be the worst, I'd say. Semyon, like Dubinina, was found in the stream. He was missing his eyes. The eyebrow, soft tissue, had come off somehow too, exposing the bone of the skull. He suffered a hard blow to the top back portion of his skull, causing the bone to protrude into the brain. The force of impact was similar to that of Nikolai's head wound. Semyon also had 5 broken ribs on his right side that had 2 different rows of fracture lines running north and south. The impact was so severe that it caused the rib bone to puncture the heart, also like in the case of Dubinina. This was obviously a different examiner than the other ones, so possibly because of a fresh eye, he was able to make an observation that the others didn't. The examiner stated that because the injuries tended to have more damage internally than the soft tissue on the outside, he stated that it tended to look like the cause something more of a shock wave would create, possibly a shock wave from a bomb. And this is what led many people to theorize that the military accidentally or purposefully tested a weapon in that area, and this is what killed the hikers. Maybe this is what Semyon was photographing in the sky. Maybe that's the light that was falling. Maybe it was a type of bomb. Another interesting thing about the discovery of Semyon's body was one of the volunteers named Vladimir Adznatsky said that when he found Semyon, in his hand were a pencil and a notebook. So Vladimir goes and gets a military colonel named Archikov, and he comes and tells him about it. And so when the colonel walks up, the colonel grabbed the notebook, he looked through it, he cursed out loud, and confiscated it. That notebook never made it back to evidence, and the only people who ever knew of its existence were Vladimir and the pilots. It's also worth mentioning that Semyon was found with a camera around his neck, but he also had one in the tent, which was found and the pictures were developed. According to Yuri Yudin, the one hiker who had to drop out in the beginning of the trip, stated that to his knowledge there were only 5 cameras handed out for the trip. Now that would mean that Semyon brought his own camera and kept it hid. For what and why, though, are the questions that are left behind. I mean, this is 59. You know, those kind of cameras that they had, they weren't cheap. You don't just have a camera, a secondary camera, you know. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Let me finish this up. All right, so the last 2 hikers, which is, I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but it's the 2 Yuris. All right, so you're going to hear me refer to them as the Yuris, because the last 2 hikers found together were Yuri Durashenko and Yuri Krivonashenko, and they were found directly under the cedar tree together. Now, these 2 were found with the least bit of clothes, but it's believed the reason for this is because they died first, and their companions divided their belongings to give them a better chance at survival. both Yuris had severe frostbite to their toes and fingers, which to me says they may have been the most underdressed. They had many abrasions around their face and hands, just like the others, but one of the things that stood out the most is that Yuri Doroshenko's hair was burned off on the right side of his head, and Yuri Krivonashenko was found with a piece of his own knuckle in his mouth. So either he was trying to stifle himself to be quiet, or he was trying to stop himself from falling asleep. The medical examiner agrees that the source of their injuries was from falls on hard surfaces, but the deaths were ultimately from hypothermia. Now, during the examination, the doctor did find that both Yuris had signs of livor mortis, which means that the bodies were moved after their death at some point. Now, it's not sure if this was done by their comrades or what, but it sounds strange to me. Like, why only these two? And we'll get to all that shortly. And here's one last interesting fact about the Yuris and this cedar. Now, it's been found that they were climbing the tree at some point. Now, at first, people were thinking it was to get more branches for the fire, but that changed after they further examined the scene. And that changed because around the area there would have been much better wood for the fire, dead wood. And it would have been much easily accessible, so that canceled out that they were in the tree for firewood. And that kind of got the ball rolling on looking harder into what this tree was used for. And then they witnessed the pattern in the tree branches. So, what someone did, and I'm not sure if this was Yuri or not, but they started climbing the tree, and on the large branches as high as they could get, they would cut one side and let the branch fold down. And what this did was that it gave them a place to sit or kind of lodge themselves in there, while also creating like a sort of a hunter's blind, as one rescuer put. So I'm not sure if you know what a blind is, but imagine a deer blind. A deer blind is like a something that they put in bushes or they put in trees, but basically it's a place for them to sit, and there's like a fake foliage that kind of obscures the vision of them and whatever they're hunting. Alright. So, what does that mean? Well, we're almost to that point. Alright, so hang on. Alright, so this sums up the events that happened on the trip of the Dyatlov group. From start to finish, with the summary of all their injuries, you have all that knowledge. And now we can look at what it's thought to have caused this unfortunate incident that claimed the lives of 9 young people. And now, there's one main theory that the authorities have all decided to run with, so we'll go over that one first, and then work into others that could also be true. And then, of course, I'll wrap it up with my personal theory. So, as we touched on it earlier, the main theory that the medical examiners and authorities claimed happened was a freak avalanche or slab avalanche. And supposedly this caught the group unaware, and this is what killed them. This was a simple explanation in my opinion. I mean, it was cold and there was snow, so it almost seems too easy to say case closed on that one. The problem with this is some of the injuries don't match up with what an avalanche is. Internal injuries with no damage to the outside tissue. I mean, most had damage all to the chest and head area. And so why is that? I mean, do avalanches not break legs? Do they not break ankles or wrists or fingers? Do avalanches also leave behind traces of radioactivity? I mean, I'm not here to try to debunk these claims. I'm just sharing some of my thoughts, all right? And I'll leave it at that. I will say one thing, though, and we briefly talked about this earlier. They did find traces of avalanches in the area. So it could be a possibility, I guess. I don't know. You can't completely rule it out. The next theory that caught some traction was that the Mansi people killed the hikers. Now, this one here kind of made me think a bit. And if you remember in one of the diaries, they were talking about following in the hunters' trails to help guide their way. It also mentions that the deer trail ends and the hunter continued. So my point is, what if because they were following too closely to the hunter, that this was causing him to lose all his deers? And maybe when he realized the reason why, this caused him to make a plan for revenge, basically. I mean, you see it on the internet every day. There's people that are fighting each other at restaurants for not getting their food or for poor service. I mean, people do things when they get hangry. And so if this guy depends on this deer to survive, I mean, it's not like there's a grocery store anywhere nearby. And if you know anything about hunting, like when a deer gets spooked, they don't just run a little bit, a little ways away from you. They run to a whole completely different part of the range. And sometimes it's miles and miles away. And if you scare them too often, it makes them reluctant to even come back to that area because they know that it's a high traffic area. Animals are not stupid. And when you mess with somebody's livelihood like that, that's sometimes reason enough for someone to snap. But it's noteworthy to say that the Mansi people were questioned, but nothing came of it. I'm guessing the authorities were satisfied with their answers. The next theory was that the military was testing a weapon in the area, or they were testing it on them on purpose. So if you recall, one of the medical examiners stated that the injuries were consistent with the shock wave from an explosion. And since there was no evidence of a blast near the sites, the theory was maybe they were experimenting with like a type of sound wave. Perhaps the first sound wave startled them so bad to where they cut their way out of the tent, thinking that there was an actual avalanche coming. When they come out, they don't stop to look around and investigate. They run as quickly as they can for the tree line. And granted, I mean, it's known too that the direction in which they did run was up and away from the slope. Okay, so that would have been up and away from the direction of the supposed falling snow. Now, when they get down to the tree line, they start to set up a makeshift campsite, and that's when they get hit again by the second sound wave. And this kills the 2 Uris by the tree and the 4 in the den, and the remaining 3, disoriented by the blast, attempt to make one last run for the tent, and to where they succumb to their injuries trying to get there. And, there's a ton more of these, and I really wish I could share all of them with you, but this episode is running hella long, and I don't want to make a 2-parter, so I'm going to ask that if you're interested in this case, I'm going to give you a link, and you can go and check out all the other theories for yourself. And you won't be sorry, I promise. This case is super interesting, and there are tons of case files that you can look through and documents that support everything pretty well. And if you want to chat over this topic, I'm going to post the Reddit link in the show notes, and we can definitely chat about it there. We always have an open forum there. So come on Reddit and let me know what you think happened in this case. I'd love to hear what you got. All right, so before I wrap it up, I'll let you know what I think went down. So I'm going to chalk this one up. Hit the drum roll. I'm going to chalk this one up to aliens, guys. And before you turn me off, before you call me crazy, let me give you my scenario first, and then I'll explain to you how I came to this conclusion. All right? I got facts to back it up, all right? I'm not just saying this shit. All right, so let me give you my scenario. It's the night of the 2nd, and Zolotaryov, who mysteriously is the odd man out of this group, starts to see these lights in the sky. And I feel like he didn't just find his way into this group by chance either, by the way. I think he was planted there because someone knew something strange was going on in that area, and he was planted into this group to find out what it is. Hence the reason he was given another secret camera the crew knew nothing about. So, Zolotaryov is seeing this light, and one of the aliens comes towards the tent, and he's actually able to snap a picture of it through one of the openings in the tent. And for proof of this, I'm going to refer you to the show notes, and you can see the picture for yourself that Simeon took. And when this happens, the alien retreats, and then Zolotaryov comes out fully dressed with a pencil and a notebook and his camera in hopes to document what he's seeing. At that point, Nikolai Brignol was already outside relieving himself when the aliens or creatures make their first attack in response to Simeon's flash in their face. This almost levels the campsite, and Simeon screams out for everyone to run to the tree line. Now, the ones on the inside of the tent cut their back of the tent open because this would give them a direct shot, line of sight to the destination, and then they all bolt out. Now, first, they all run all the way down to the cedar and begin trying to combat the cold. Zolotaryov, being a decorated soldier, instructs the Uris both to start making a fire, and he gets the other one started on trenching out the den. While he climbs into the tree, he starts to cut the limbs down in a way to where they make a hanging deer blind or a hunter's blind, certainly a tactic that he's performed before in combat. And as they're all working, the aliens spot them and return to finish the job because they cannot allow them to escape after taking pictures and knowing they exist. Now, while the Uris are fixing the fire, the aliens attack for the first time, hitting them with some type of weapon that hits with the shock wave and force of a car accident. Now, this disables them, causing Doroshenko's head to land close to the fire, in which it ignites, and this also leaves the high levels of radiation on both of them. After the aliens retreat a little bit, Zolotaryov drops from the tree and regroups with the others by the den. But once he gets there, the aliens attack once more, hitting them with the weapon so hard that the shockwave breaks Zolotaryov's skull and blows out his eyes and breaks his ribs on the side the blast came from. Dubinino must have been close to him because she also takes most of the brunt of the impact, and this causes her to receive similar injuries as Zolotaryov. Zenaida, Igor, and Rustem flee back towards the tent with heavy damage, though. Alexander throws himself over Zolotaryov, trying to protect him, knowing that he's probably their best chance for survival, but it's to no avail. Another blast knocks him out, and Nikolai, leaving them soon to die. The other three almost make it back to the tent. Zenaida in the front, the two men trying to protect her from the rear, meet their end shortly after the four by the den. Once the battle is over, the aliens or creatures, whatever they are, fly away, leaving us with a mystery that would probably never truly be solved. All right. Now, why do I say that this happened, or why do I believe that this is the way that it went down? So, let me give you some main factors that brought me to this scenario. Okay. Now, of course, that's going to be the radiation found on their clothes. All right. But also the injuries. All right. The injuries that they had, that they sustained, didn't come from falls on rocks or ice. These people were beat to hell, but not with any kind of weapon that we know of. All right. The other thing that makes me believe this happened is Zolotaryov's last picture. Now, once you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about, and that's all I can say. But once you see it, you know something was looking in at that tent, and he snapped a picture right in its face. Another crazy picture is number 17 on Zenaida's camera. Now, she captured something there, and I can tell you right away that she was spooked by it. Now, when people see this picture, the main theory on what it is that they claim that it's a Yeti. But I don't think it's a Yeti. I think it's one of the, whatever the creature is that attacked them, I think that's what it is. You can tell it's like the outline of a picture of a figure, but it's like hiding behind a tree, like kind of looking out, like peeking past the tree at them. And she snapped a picture of it by accident. All right. And so another factor is that another hiking group just 30 miles to the south saw large orange orbs and lights going off over the ridge exactly where the Dyatlov group would have been camping. Meteorologists and air traffic controllers also reported seeing orbs all the way from the beginning of February to the end of May. All right, and that's documented as well, and that'll be in the show notes. And another factor, but wait, there's more. Zolotaryov's notebook that the colonel took. I'm telling you, Zolotaryov, he wrote down what he saw there. And I don't think it was just from that one day. I think that he was seeing things the whole time he was there. I think he probably had a full notebook on what he was seeing. And I think it started happening the minute that they left that labor camp. The minute they got away from the city, I think that's when he started seeing things. And the final nail in the coffin is that Zolotaryov's mother, and only her, out of all the family members and out of all the other mothers in the group, was given the sum of 1,400 rubles for support by the government. And again, only Zolotaryov's mother was picked up by a helicopter and flown over to the site where the other bodies were found, and they told her, "Down there is your son, but he's not alive," and apologized to her. Now, you tell me why only the Zolotaryov family were the only ones to receive these pleasantries. If you ask me, this was them fulfilling a promise made when they became aware that he died. This is, that could have been part of the deal. Like, I'm gonna go over here and look for y'all, but if I don't make it, take care of my mother. And that's exactly what they did. But anyways, that's what I think that happened. If you want to share your story with me, you're more than welcome to do that. I would appreciate it if you did. And if you want to send me an email, what you're going to do is you're going to send that to info@spacecityxfiles.com. Or, like I said, come check us out on Reddit. We're going to have the episode up there, and we can free chat about it, less formal setting. And all the episodes are up there also. So if there's any other episode that you found interesting that you want to chat about, just go over there and hit me up, send me a message. I'm always online, lurking around. And yeah. Well, that's the story of the Dyatlov incident. I hope you all enjoyed the episode. And like always, I hope to see you on the next one. This is Rick with the Space City X-Files. Y'all take care.